Alright class, in today's lesson we're going to be looking at how we can use midpoint. But before we go into our examples, let's look at some facts and definitions. And the first one that we have is the actual definition for midpoint. Midpoint is the middle point of a line, or you can say the halfway point of a line. So when we look at a line, just to give an example, what we're looking at in this is that we have what we call an endpoint here, and then we have another endpoint. So we're going to be using these two endpoints to help us find the middle point or the halfway point of it all. Okay. Now, in order to do that, we're going to be looking at and using the formula. So let's break this formula down. So when we look at the formula, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the order pairs, and we're going to take the x values. We're going to add both the x values together, and then we're going to take the result of those two x values. Once we add them together, we're going to divide it by 2. And then we're going to look at the y values. We're going to add both those y values together, and we're going to divide that by 2. And once we get the results for both of those, we're going to put them back together in an order pair, and that will give us our midpoint. So for us, this is how we're going to set it up. We're going to take the first order pair they gave us, and we're going to put it on top of the second order pair they gave us. When we line them up correctly, one side will be the x, the other side will be the y. So then we're going to add those two numbers together for x's. We're going to add the two numbers for y together, and then we're going to take those results and we're going to divide them by 2, and that will give us our midpoint, and it should be in the correct order in which we need it for the answer. Okay. Now, if we go a little bit further down in our notes, you'll see that I actually added a little chart here for reference, just for integers when we adding signs of the same and we're adding signs that are different. Okay, just remember, if the signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. But if the signs are different, you will take the sign of the larger. So it depends. You're basically going to be like, you're going to subtract the numbers because the signs are different, and you'll take the sign of the larger. Okay, so now let's look at some examples. And when we look at our examples, we got to make sure we pay attention to the signs that are attached to the numbers in the order pair, because that will tell us if we're going to basically add the numbers together or if we got to subtract them and keep the sign of the bigger number. All right, so now let's look at example 1. All right, so now let's look at example 1. What they want us to do is we got to find the midpoint of this problem. So to get the midpoint, we got to know that what they gave us, which is 2 order pairs, got to be the endpoint. So this, I'm just going to put E1 for endpoint 1. This is my E2, which is my endpoint 2. Now, in each order pair, you are giving an x value and a y value. So we have our x and y. So our order pair is -2, -6, and -6 and +10. So for us, what we're going to do, we're going to stack these order pairs. So I'm going to write down my first order pair, which is -2 and -6. And underneath that, I'm going to write the second one, which is -6 and 10. Now, in an order pair, we already know that x is first, y is second. And because we're doing midpoint, we have to add these together. Now, I got a -2 plus -6. Signs are the same. Because the signs are the same, I'm going to add and keep the sign. That'll give me a -8. Then we have a -6 and a +10. Now, those signs are not the same. We got a negative and a positive. Because they are opposite signs, we have to subtract the numbers, keep the sign of the bigger. So 6 minus 10 is going to be 4. And the bigger number in that was the 10 is positive, so that's going to give us a +4. Now, the next thing we do after we add them together is we're going to take and divide both of those numbers by 2. So if I take and divide -8 by 2, we get -4. And if I take and divide +4 by 2, we get +2. So the midpoint of the order pair is -2, -6, and -6 and 10. The midpoint will be -4 and +2. All right, so now let's move on to example 2. All right, so now in example 2, we are still finding the midpoint, but this one they did not just list the order pairs for us. They put a line on a graph with 2 dots, and those 2 dots are still going to be considered to be your order pairs Now, in this one though, we have to find the order pairs, and we got to make sure that we get our order pairs correct. So if we look at this and we get our order pairs for our two endpoints, so this is endpoint 1, so I'm going to put E1. This is endpoint number 2. Now, the endpoint 1, if you notice that where it's at from the center of your graph, which is here, and we go over to the line in which the dot is on, which is -4, and then we have to go down to -4. So that means the order pair for E1 is -4, -4. And then we're going to do the same thing for E2, which is the second endpoint. So we start in the center of our graph, then we go over to where the line that the dot is on. So that's going to give us our X value, which is +5. But this one didn't move from there. So that means I didn't go up or down to get to another line. So that means it's on 0. So the order pair for that one will be 5 and 0. Now, once I get my two order pairs, I do like I did before. I'm going to stack my order pairs on top of each other. Put the first one, so that's going to be -4, -4. Then underneath that, I'm going to put 5 and 0. Now from there, I will add them together. Paying attention to my signs, because signs are going to be very important. Now remember, we're not using Desmos, so we have to do this by hand. That is a -4 and a +5. So because I have a -4 and a +5, the signs are different. I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the larger. So I got -4, +5. When I subtract them, that becomes +1. And then I got -4 plus 0. I got a negative and a positive. Signs are different. Basically subtracting, that's still going to be -4. All right, so I got my order pairs added together. I got my X side added and my Y side added. Okay, now I'm going to do the last step. The last step says for me to find midpoint, I have to take and divide the results of me adding by 2. Now, when I take 1 and divide it by 2, it's not a whole number. It's actually a decimal. So you're going to get 0.5. Okay? Now, if I take -4 and divide it by 2, that's going to give me -2. So in order to test my order pair, you can graph it, but we still have what we need is a +0.5 or a +1/2 and -2 as the midpoint for example 2. All right, so let's look at example 3. Example 3 says a straight pipeline mapped on a coordinate plane starts at 210 and ends at 82. A pump station is located halfway along the pipeline. So if we sketch what it says, we got a straight line pipe with 2 endpoints. The endpoints was at 2 and 10, 8 and 2, and then they said halfway in between is going to be the pump station. Okay, so just looking at what we have from the information, this will be E1. This will be endpoint 2. Okay, so knowing what we have is the 2 endpoints, we're going to go ahead and stack those 2 endpoints on top of each other. So we got 2, 10 over 8, 2. Now that we have them stacked, we're going to add them together. So we got a +2, +8 add together become +10. And then we got a +10 and a +2 add together becomes +12. And then to finalize what we have, we're going to take those two numbers to get endpoint. We're going to divide them by 2. What we get is 10 divided by 2 is 5, and it stays positive. And then we got +12 divided by 2, which is going to give us a +6. So the midpoint for the pump station will be at 5 and 6 on the coordinate plane. So now that we have example 3 completed, let's look at the final example, example 4. All right, so let's look at our final example. And it says, what is the coordinates of the pump station? It says line segment. So a line segment is basically just a straight line. Line segment MQ. So we got M here, Q. Has an endpoint for M, which is at 3, 2. And Q, which is at 15, 10. Now, we have the line segment with the points M and Q. And it says point N is the midpoint of line segment MQ. So the middle point in this one is N. It says what is the middle point of line segment NQ? But NQ is the middle of M and Q. So if we look at where N is and go to Q, that's not, they didn't give us anything for the middle of that. So we're going to use that last statement and we're going to redraw another line segment with the letters N and Q on it. But now we know the point for Q, which is at 15 and 10. But we don't know what the point is for N. So we're going to use what we have for M and Q to get N, and then we'll write that over there for the second line segment to help us get our final answer. So let's find the midpoint for the first line segment. So in our first line segment, we're going to stack the order pairs. We got 3, 2, and 15 and 10. So if I add those together, that's going to be 3 plus 15, which makes 18. And then we got 2 plus 10, which makes 12. To get midpoint, we're going to divide both those by 2. So 18 divided by 2 is going to be 9. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So the order pair for N is 9, 6. So that means the order pair for the middle of M and Q is 9, 6. That means this order pair also goes here. We can use that to help us get the middle or the midpoint for NQ. Okay, so stack our order pairs like we're supposed to. So that's going to be 9 and 6, 15 and 10. We add them together. 9 plus 15 is going to give us 24. And then 6 plus 10 makes 16. To get the midpoint, we're going to take and divide those by 2. So 24 divided by 2 is going to give me 12. 16 divided by 2 is 8. So the midpoint of NQ is 12 and 8. So this one is our final answer that we had to get to solve this problem. So now that we finished with example 4, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. But the way that we find midpoint is we take the end points that they give us, add them together, and then divide them by 2, and that will give us midpoint. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.